This wasn't just losing a House seat. You were in leadership. You were considered a future Speaker of the House, a potential future, maybe even the next Speaker of the House. It's a lot to give up. Any regrets?
No regrets. You know, I feel sad about where my party is. I feel sad about the way that too many of my colleagues have responded to what I think is a great moral test and challenge of our time. A great moment to determine whether or not people are going to stand up on behalf of the democracy and on behalf of our republic.
As I'm sure you all know by now, Congresswoman Liz Cheney lost her bid for re-election, proving once and for all, surely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Republican Party is now the party of Trump. Cheney had become, over the past 18 months, the party's most vocal critic of former President Donald Trump, serving as vice chair of the January 6th Select Committee and frequently speaking out against the Donald's big lie. And now, of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach the former president, only 2 will be on the ballot in November. 4 of them, including Cheney, lost their primary races, and 4, including Adam Kinzinger, are retiring. So what will be the future of the now cult-like GOP once these Republicans leave office in January? And who exactly is to blame for Trump's takeover? Did he really swoop in and hijack the party, as many have argued? Or were the roots of Trumpism already flourishing within the GOP? Were so-called establishment Republicans actually paving the way for Trump, even as they issued cautious and occasionally tepid statements of condemnation? Some have pointed the finger at people like former House Speaker Paul Ryan, who sure was no MAGA booster, but the argument goes still went along with Trump so that he could get his precious tax cuts passed in 2017. And even Liz Cheney herself, who voted with Trump more than 90% of the time in Congress. My next guest is just the person to ask. Brendan Buck served as a top aide to Paul Ryan, leading the former speaker's messaging and communications teams. Before that, he was a press secretary to Republican House Speaker John Boehner, and he also worked for the man who could be the next Republican Speaker of the House, California Congressman Kevin McCarthy. And Brendan Buck joins me now. Brendan, thanks so much for coming on the show. What did you make of Liz Cheney's defeat in her primary last week? A lot of people were suggesting that was the date you could use to write the GOP's obit. That was the day you could say the Republican Party we once knew was well and truly dead. Do you share that view?
I don't think it was that date. I think we knew for a long time that this was Trump's party, and I think everybody expected that she was going to lose. I think Liz Cheney knew she was going to lose. Liz Cheney could have won that race if she wanted to, just like Republicans all across the country have done what they need to win. And that's what made what Liz Cheney did so remarkable, is that in this party, she knew that she had to throw away her seat to say what she thought about these things. And so yes. I'm not surprised. I think this has been where the party has been headed for quite a long time, and she knew that.
In the wake of the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago and now with these primary defeats of anti-Trump candidates, do you share the view of former GOP Congressman and never Trumper Joe Walsh, who said on this show the other week that this has made the prospect, this all of it together has made the prospect of a 2024 Trump presidential candidacy much more likely? He is, as of right now, the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party.
I'd agree, but I always thought that he was going to be the nominee. This is still Donald Trump's party. Let's be very clear. His control of the party perhaps had slipped a little bit in the last couple of years, but I don't think that was necessarily because people had turned away from Donald Trump or even that they liked Ron DeSantis better. It was just that he wasn't on the stage. And I think as soon as Donald Trump returned to the stage, this was always going to happen. I don't know why someone would want an imitation when they can have the original. I think he was always going to be the nominee. I think what it does is it keeps a Ron DeSantis perhaps from not challenging him. Maybe a Mike Pence still does. But as you saw, when Donald Trump is under attack, people are rallying to his defense. And I think his road to the nomination is much clearer now.
As I've said on this show before, I probably have more chance of being the 2024 GOP nominee than Mike Pence. But Brendan, does Liz Cheney run for the presidency as a Republican, as an independent, to hurt Trump? What do you think?
That's something she's going to have to figure out. Obviously, she has said she is going to be running a campaign to defeat Donald Trump from being president. I don't know if that necessarily means that she is going to be on the ballot. Very little chance that she's going to have any impact in a Republican primary were she to be on the ballot. She's not stealing any meaningful votes from Donald Trump. And even if she tries to run as an independent, I think they have to look long and hard at whether she is going to be taking votes away from Donald Trump or actually taking votes away from Joe Biden. If you're someone like me who doesn't necessarily like Donald Trump and there's a binary choice, but now you get to vote for a Liz Cheney instead of voting for Joe Biden, you're probably stealing a vote from Joe Biden and helping Donald Trump.
It's a very good point. And by the way, I've got to ask the question since you raised it. If it is Trump Biden, who are you voting for?
I'll probably be sorting Biden. I've never voted for Donald Trump.
That's something to be proud of. There are two schools of thought, Brendan, on what happened to the GOP. One is that Trump hijacked the Republican Party. Another, that the GOP had been broken and extreme and racist for decades. Former Bush, former Romney advisor Stuart Stevens has argued that this was always what the GOP was deep down, but people like him refused to see it. He says, and I quote, "A lot of us in the party like to believe the dark side was a recessive gene, but it's a dominant theme." When you look, Brendan, at the likes of Lee Atwater or Newt Gingrich in the revolution of the 90s or Sarah Palin, this was always there in your party, was it not, that dark side?
I won't go quite as far as Stu did. I think there were some elements there that we probably ignored. I think that this party has been much more anti-immigration, much more populist, much more anti-trade, much more isolationist than we probably appreciated. And we kind of ignored that wing of the party. And we would find out every time we tried to do immigration reform, it would roar back and we wouldn't be able to get it done. So there were elements of Trumpism for a long time. And that's why I think Trump was able to come in quite so easily. There were, 15, 16 candidates who ran against him. And he defeated all of them because I think he was picking up on something that nobody else really in Republican politics had seen, maybe other than a Rand Paul. But there have been a lot of elements of the things that were there for a long time and continue to be. And that's why I think so many people who aren't Donald Trump are trying to act like Donald Trump in the party, because that's what voters want.
Brendan, talking of ignoring things, let's talk about your former boss, House Speaker Paul Ryan. You must remember the Wikipedia page for Spineless was once edited to include Paul Ryan. That was a running joke during his speakership, that he didn't have the backbone to stand up to Trump. And we just put together a collection of clips for you to watch. Have a watch.
The president's new at this. He's new to government. And so he probably wasn't steeped in the long-running protocols that establish the relationships between DOJ, FBI, and White Houses. He's just new to this.
How do you respond to the serious concerns and fears about bringing Steve Bannon into the White House?
Look, I would just simply say that the president is going to be judged on his results. This is a person who helped him win an incredible victory, an incredible campaign.
I've decided I'm not going to comment on the tweets of the day or the hour. I haven't seen them all, to be candid with you.
Donald Trump's he was a very unconventional candidate. He's going to be an unconventional president. What I like about it in my, like I said, almost daily conversations is he's just a get things done kind of guy.
Brendan, the truth is America could not have had the catastrophic Trump presidency it had without mainstream Republicans like your former boss, Paul Ryan, enabling it.
I don't agree with that. And I would ask you what you think the counterfactual alternative was. We have seen the next in line Republican leaders are no more confrontational with Donald Trump than certainly Paul Ryan was. There is this interesting narrative that on the left, I appreciate you cherry picking a bunch of clips. You obviously weren't interested in other times where he had other perspectives to share that conflicted with what Donald Trump was doing. But you can't lead a legislative body being constantly at war with your own party's president. It's just not reality. You could resign if you want, but then you're likely to get, somebody probably going along with him even more. I just don't understand exactly what you think the approach would have been to somehow make Donald Trump a normal president. He was in fact elected. We would perhaps like otherwise, but he was the president, and so we had to run a government.
I don't think anyone's
questioning.
I don't think we're questioning his presidency. He's the one who does that, questions other people's presidencies. But you're accusing us of cherry picking. I would say, Brendan, you're straw manning. The extremes are not he either resigns the speakership or he questions Donald Trump's presidency. I'm just saying when people put racist tweets from Donald Trump, he could have condemned that racism, as he did on the campaign. Remember, Paul Ryan, to his credit, condemned Trump for racism during the campaign. But the minute Trump becomes president, I didn't see the tweets. Come on, that was very convenient. That's not cherry picking. That's what he did.
No, that tells me that you live in a little ecosystem, a media ecosystem, where you only hear things that support your worldview, that Paul Ryan never stood up to him, whether it was Charlottesville, birthright citizenship, family separation. My God, over and over and over again, he defended the Mueller investigation from people who wanted to tamper in it because he knew it was the right thing to do. And it's okay if you never saw those things or you want to ignore those things, but it is simply untrue to say that he never stood up to him or he never took issue with publicly with things that he did. He did all the time. When he said that Barack Obama was spying on his campaign, he said that's not true. It happened all the time. Now, you can't go to war with him openly all the time, and that's just reality. And I know you would love it if he did go to war with him openly all the time, but then you would probably not be speaker very long. And I don't know if you would like that alternative any better.
I would have loved it for more Republicans to stand up to Donald Trump across the board. I mean, as you point out, of course, he did say some critical things. I'm talking about bigger picture if we're going to talk about cherry picking. Let me ask you this very simply, Brendan. Do you think you have no regrets as to how Paul Ryan handled Donald Trump? You're saying he walked the line perfectly, really?
Generally, I do think we did the right thing. Were there a tweet or here or there, like small ball things? I don't know. But generally, yeah, I think we handled it as well as you could, tried to make the best of a tough situation. That may not be satisfying to you. And I don't think it's cherry picking to point out the things that I think what you're trying to do is present some alternative reality where he never did that. And the reality is it's much more complicated. The reality is we don't live in black and white, and especially when you are leading a legislative body. There are nuances. There are things, there are trade-offs you have to make in politics. And now, I don't think we ever made a trade-off on fundamental principles, but if we had to not condemn a tweet one day, I don't think that's as big of a deal as it is when big things mattered and he did speak up.
Just to be clear, Brendan, I think you're a bit strawmanning again. I don't think I ever said he never stood up to Donald Trump. I think overall, if you look at the first term of Donald Trump,
but you wanted to present a picture to your audience.
I'm saying overall, he didn't stand up to Donald Trump in the way that we should have stood up. You could pick your cherry picking by saying he did this on Obama. But overall, the car crash that was Trump that makes you a Republican not want to vote for Trump, that wasn't something that he stood up to across the board. And actually, it wasn't just Ryan. Let's just make this about Ryan. Let's just do bigger picture. My contention, this is my contention in my own words, is that the Republican establishment as a whole did pave the ground for Trump by not standing up to extremism when they could have done. And I would give you one more example. John Boehner, speaker from 2010 to 2014, has become a critic of Trump. He's been very critical of the crazies in your party, especially in his own recent memoir. You worked for Boehner as well. And yet in 2011, when asked about Obama birtherism, the racist conspiracy theory, which helped pave the way for Trump. Rather than shut it down, Boehner said this, and I quote, "It's not my job to tell the American people what to think." Brendan, surely looking back in hindsight, if he had taken a strong stance then, wouldn't that have got a long way to stopping Trump and Trumpism from taking over your party?
Yeah, I think birtherism was terrible. I don't exactly recall what the situation, what that quote was. I know when Paul Ryan had somebody ask him, a constituent ask him about birtherism, he would mail his constituent a copy of the president's birth certificate. So, but yeah, I don't know that we took that terribly seriously. Maybe we should have taken it more seriously. I personally didn't take Donald Trump very seriously back then, but certainly there were signs that things were going in a bad direction back then. Perhaps we should have taken them more seriously. I think that again was not a front and center issue for us back in 2011.